So yeah, Mike, thanks for joining us again on another X Spaces. Obviously, it's a pivotal few months coming up for Blencowe with completion of the DFS and the transition from a developer into a producer. So can we start with the recent drilling program? Where are you with the assays and the assay results and the JORC resource upgrade?
Where am I? Well, actually, first, I just want to say thank you for all the people that have taken the time to get on board to listen to this. I think we've got record numbers, which is great, and I appreciate every one of you taking your time to listen in, because it's not easy at the middle of the day. So thanks for that. In terms of the drill program, look, it's taken longer than it should have, and it's taken longer than I expected to get all this done. And it's very frustrating because obviously, we're only as good as some of the people that we have to use in the process, including getting samples out of the country. But I'm glad to say that we're nearly there. We've obviously had some assay results come through, the initial ones. We've had a few challenges. We had a QA/QC problem in one of the labs, which has caused an issue which wouldn't allow them to give us any assays for anything over 10%. And obviously we want those results because they're the high grade. So we had to go back and resample a whole lot of camp load assays. So it's been a bit frustrating, but those results are going to start coming through. We're probably, I'd say, about a week away, and we'll get the next ones out, and then it should be a regular flow, culminating in a JORC resource upgrade, and then ultimately getting more assay results out for Beehive, and then probably putting out an exploration target, a revised exploration target after that, because we didn't do enough drilling there to get all of it into a JORC resource. So it's going to be, just to be clear, assay results, JORC upgrade, and that will be largely a JORC upgrade of reserves, just to be clear, because the majority of what we did in this particular program was infill drilling to ensure that we could get a much more significant tonnage and a longer lifespan of life of mine. So it's all about converting that 12, 13 million tons of reserves to something much, much higher. And then the additional work that we did on the new stuff will come into the exploration target, and it will obviously allow us to go and do some more infilling next year, and that can really push that JORC number as a resource thereafter. So, yeah, it's coming, and hopefully quite soon.
Okay,
Darren, Mike, do you mind
Yes.
if I interrupt? I just thought there's a lot of new interest in Blencowe recently, and a lot of new investors have obviously been showing interest in the stock. So I thought it might be quite useful if you set a little bit of context on the basic project pitch from the beginning on Orem Cross. Why you think Orem Cross is so unique? Why you think it's potential tier one project? Why it's garnering so much attention from the market and from some of these quite unique groups that you're talking to. Is that okay, Mike? Mike, I know you're good at this because it's
No,
like
that's
on
fine. That's
it's on
fine,
the first
Sasha. I mean,
page
I
of
don't
your
mind doing it. I
presentation,
know a
and
lot
I've
of
read
these
it.
people have heard it before, so I won't go into too much detail. But in essence, Orem Cross is definitely unique. It's unique for the sake of the size and scale. I can't tell you how big it is because I don't think we'll ever know. But the estimate is somewhere between 2 and 3 billion tons. And within the one mining license that we've got, 1959, we've got at the moment a significant life of mine. But as I say, with further infill drilling, we can just keep adding to that and adding to that. So it's going to be an extremely long life of mine just within the ML that we've got. And then we've got other ELs that we can persevere with beyond that. And ultimately this could be over 100 years of life of mine. So that in itself is very significant. But I think, I bang on quite a lot about these key fundamentals because I've been doing this now for 6 years. And I've sat here and watched many of my peers who had a DFS when we started 6 years ago, and they still haven't made it into production. And I keep watching and watching and wondering why they're not getting there. And there's various reasons, of course, they're not all the same. But at the end of the day, it boils down to the 6 core fundamentals, which I think are absolutely critical to achieving success in graphite mining. The first of which is having low operating costs. Without that, you're going to struggle because you're always going to be price dependent, particularly when it comes to small flake concentrate. And if you're relying on the prices to double before you can make any profit, you're out. It's out of your hands, and so having low operating costs means that you're going to make margin at all different prices, including today's. So low operating costs is the first one. And then low capital costs is the second one, because if you're sitting in the middle of nowhere and you've got to go and create all your infrastructure, and it's going to cost you an awful lot of money, and it's going to cost you in terms of repaying that debt, in terms of interest, in terms of repayments, it's just a big, big burden. And it's one that's definitely causing problem for some of my peers. So low capital costs is the other one. The third one is high purity of end product. We've seen it time and time again. I've been all over Asia, China, talking to off-takers, and they simply don't want your product if it's just low quality. Maybe you'll get some sales into something, but you'll get low prices, and it's like being the not-so-best-looking girl at the dance. Nobody wants to dance with you. So with high purity of end product, you have that opportunity to get the interest from the off-takers, and then you can start getting into niche off-takers, and then you get the best prices, the highest demand, etc. And that's absolutely critical, because at the end of the day, your product in the ground is what it is. The chemical characteristics are not changing. They've been there for millions of years. It's to do with things like tap density, which is how much energy density you have there, which is critical to how the battery will perform, and other things, sulfur, etc., etc. So I think purity is probably one of the most important of all. And then it boils down to the other three, which I think are very important also. And the first one is having a mining license in your hand, because there are many, many projects that just may not get there for one reason or the other, particularly environmental issues. But we have that mining license in place. And then the next one I have, which is so critical, is owning 100% of your project. Because if you end up giving away a 15% free carry, which is the norm in Africa, again, it boils down to returns. If you don't have enough returns, it becomes very, very tricky to make it successful, and ultimately returns to your shareholders. And then finally, last but not least, it's about the safe jurisdiction that you're in. And I think Uganda is one of the absolute best. It's benign. We can build a long-term project there. I don't see any big risks that there are in other places in Africa. And so that, added to all the rest, creates these 6 fundamentals. Now, from where I'm sitting, I think Orem Cross is the only project that has all 6 of those. And any one of them missing creates a big problem. And that's why we're not seeing other graphite projects getting into production. If we have those, I'm not saying it's guarantee of success. There never is. There's always risks out there, but it's it's like building a foundation for a house. It means that you've got a strong base to start from. And then you're overlaying things like the DFC for financial support, and obviously for their credibility they give us. Overlaying things like the downstream SPG strategy, which gives us another notch and another ability to do something different and value adding. And you're building other pieces on top of that. But at the end of the day, all of these points together, I think, create what I call a very, very unique project. And it's going to come through when we produce the DFS results. We're going to show it, because that just gives you the opportunity to put out numbers, which people can then look at and read. And it obviously gives you a big report that's signed off by a very experienced third-party engineering firm that proves the credibility of everything that you've said to a much, much greater degree than what we did in the PFS a couple of years ago. So I don't want to go too long, because I could spend hours, and you've got me onto my favorite subject. But at the end of the day, those are the reasons why I think we're unique.
Yeah, thanks for suggesting that, Sasha, because we always come into this, if you like, forum thinking it's existing investors, but obviously there are new investors now in Blencowe, and potentially other new investors coming along as well. So yeah, that was a good overview there, Mike. Moving on then, in terms of the DFS, which is obviously what people are very much focused on at the moment, what's the likely timing for the completion of that?
Yeah, I thought you were going to ask that question. At the end of the day, I don't want to get down to days and weeks and put an exact date on it, because for the obvious reason, this little delay that we've had with the QA/QC on the assay results has set us back a couple of weeks. But I'm going to be in London presenting at this one-to-one conference, this resourcing tomorrow, in the first week of December. And I can assure you that I don't want to be standing up there without the DFS completed, because that's what I need to present. So our internal target is the end of November. If we can do better than that, obviously we will. But we need to make sure it's done properly, and there's a lot of checks that have to go on to make sure it's accurate, and we haven't got any slip-ups. So yeah, that's the best I can give you. We're targeting the end of November, which is 6 weeks away, really, 7 weeks away from where we are now, Max. So, and just to be clear, the delays that we've had in terms of the JORC resource, we're getting all the other stuff done in parallel. There's a lot of other work that's getting done to fit in, and it'll all just get completed. And then the final piece of the puzzle will be the infill drilling goes into the JORC upgrade, particularly for the camp load, because that's critical to the early stage because of the high grade. And then obviously the mine plans that go with mining that, and that will just get fitted in and slotted in at the last minute, and then it'll flow through into the model and obviously give us the results. So yeah, that's my best guess at timing from now, which is, look, it's certainly before the end of the quarter, and definitely before Christmas.
Yeah, and just to be clear, you mentioned earlier about doing additional exploration drilling for additional increases to the JORC resource, but that's not a precursor to the DFS, right?
No, absolutely not. I mean, that would just be to take, we should expect, because of the success we've had in the deep holes in the new Beehive deposit, we've got a lot more tons available. But as you know, you have to drill them at particular spacing in order to bring them in as a JORC inferred resource and ultimately a JORC indicated resource. So yeah, it's just a question of whether Minrom, as our technical consultants, will allow some of it in as an inferred resource, and other parts of that will just remain as an exploration target. But we don't need it for the DFS. We've got enough tons for sure. That's why, as I said earlier, the majority of the work that we're doing with this JORC upgrade is all on the reserves, because that does go into the DFS. That's what it's all about. But at any stage next year, year after, whenever we choose to, we can go and do more drilling at Beehive or anywhere else, and obviously turn those tons into JORC resource for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, another thing that, while we're talking about the DFS, another thing that bangs its way around the bulletin boards, investors seem to be obsessed by it, obviously, is funding. Now, can you just confirm you are fully funded to actually complete the DFS, right?
Absolutely. We've got all the funds we need to do that, yes.
Okay, cool. All right. It was worth touching on, because it just gets a lot of airtime on the bulletin boards. Okay, so what is the plan post DFS then, in terms of funding, a funding solution for first production, and just funding in general? Obviously, people look at the DFS and you get to it and you think, right, well, that's been delivered, that's nice. And people often don't see, like, they don't realize what the value triggers are post a DFS. Now, if you take a mining company that's doing this massive project with massive capex, and they're going to go and do, they're doing the full-on project, then you can see maybe a gap between the DFS and something else material coming along. But with your plan with early production, what have you, what does the sort of like the funding solution look like post DFS?
Well, look, I don't have it yet, so I can't say exactly what it is, but the plan will be to get what I call P1 production, which is our initial early stage production, up and running as quickly as we can. And in the reality of it all is that it's going to take us a couple of months to put a funding solution in place, even though we've been working on it for a couple of months already, and it's moving forward. But you're relying on third parties, and they just take a long time to do their DD and all the rest of it. But assuming that we can have a successful DFS, and assuming that we can get term sheets in play for a first phase funding solution, then we would look to enact that very quickly into the 2026 calendar year, and push to try and get, if funds are obviously available, to get everything put together and brought out in containers to be assembled as quickly as possible. Now, the target would be to try and get it all done and dusted and up and ready for first production by the end of the calendar year. It's a huge target, because we've got a lot of work to do, both in terms of the funding solution, and then once that's in place, to actually get all the the facilities, the the processing plant, all the camp, everything has to be put into place, including obviously infrastructure. So yeah, and then while that is happening, and we've got something up and running which would produce about 10,000 tons of concentrate per annum. In parallel, I would be looking to put the larger funding solution in place, which will take longer, and that will be to ramp that facility up from 10,000 tons up to about another 50,000 to make it 60,000 tons in total, and to build this downstream SPG plant. Obviously, it'll be a small one to start, and again, it'll be modular to the extent that it can grow as we grow going forward. So P1 is to get into production as quickly as we possibly can. P2 is to expand Orem Cross or ramp it up. And P3 will be to get the downstream SPG facility into place as quickly as we can to take some of that small flake concentrate when we ramp up, because it's so valuable to take it and obviously upgrade it in country. So, yeah, it's a lot of work. We've got a lot to do, and I think there's a lot of news flow. There's a lot of exciting, events that are going to happen along that journey. In one way, we're hopefully going to get funding solutions and start building something. And then we've obviously got a much bigger funding solution happening to go thereafter. And they may not necessarily be the same funding partners, because it's all about who can move quick enough to be in there for the first phase and get it done quickly.
Yeah.
Does that answer?
Okay. Yes, it does. It does. Yeah. You touched on earlier about the DFS and just how much work has gone into it, and investors probably don't realise. If you look around other mining companies that have done DFSs, just how much work Blencowe has had to do, and partly because of the nature of the product, which is the graphite. Even like your 100-ton bulk sampling program. So this is a big ticket item that's coming, right? The DFS, it's the biggest milestone I think in Blencowe's existence. Once you've delivered that, and assuming the numbers look good, which I'm believing they're going to be, how do you see the register, the share register changing beyond the DFS? In terms of perhaps institutions coming on board and what have you. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. The funds and the institutional market tends to follow market caps that are much larger than we are at the moment. So, and they tend to follow de-risked companies that are generally in production or pre-production, definitely post DFS. So as we pass through this milestone, get the DFS done, hopefully, our market cap is already rising. I mean, we're nearly double what we were not too long ago. So, as this continues to rise, as we de-risk, I would very much hope to get some funds on board, some institutional support. One of the reasons I'm going to be coming and presenting at that conference in London is to try and look to get some cornerstone investors involved and start to build that register with that support going forward. Because I think it's going to be important. I mean, I'm going to try as far as possible to deliver funding solutions which are, debt orientated, especially in the first instance. But somewhere along the line, we are going to have to put some equity on the table. And whether that's equity at Blencowe level or at the project level, I don't know. But I want to make sure that by the time we've done that, we've got this market cap way higher than what it is now. And obviously, if we have some good funds backing us and they want to follow their positions, then it obviously helps in terms of being able to pick up some equity that we need at that point. But, that's some way in the future from here. But I do see the register changing. And you probably noticed that, well, I think people have, that Jangada left. They sold out over the last month or so. They took advantage of the incredible liquidity that we've had over the last month. And that's okay. I mean, I spoke to Brian McMaster, and, at the end of the day, he's got his own company. They're pursuing a project in Brazil. They needed money, and they couldn't necessarily raise it in the market without paying a silly discount. So they sold their shares because they had the opportunity to do so. And, I can't argue with any of that. And what was brilliant is that it all just got swallowed up very quickly. And, kudos to the people who took it up, because I think they're going to be the winners. They've picked it up at exactly the right time. So it's an evolving thing, a register. You can't ever take it for granted. I never do. And I certainly hope that we're going to get much more institutional support going forward. Not to say that we don't want the retail support. We appreciate all that as well. But yeah, it's going to evolve, as does with most mining companies as they evolve towards production.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, the let's move on to the US. There is a lot of activity coming from the US. There's been a number of deals done. I think there was a rare earth deal done the other week, where USA Rare Earths acquiring a rare earth producing company in the UK, believe it or not. And there seems to be more and more noise around the US looking at critical minerals projects globally, well, and specifically outside of China for obvious reasons. Have you, as a company, had any interest from the US side, aside of the DFC, of what we already know that are engaged in Orem Cross?
We definitely do, and I agree with you. I think it's very exciting times. I think the Trump administration has signaled that they want to not just talk about critical mineral supply chains, but actually do something about it. And there's a huge difference because we've seen a lot of talk in the past that hasn't really meant anything. But they are talking about stockpiling significant graphite. And I'm really hoping that we're going to be one of the projects that's picked to be part of that stockpiling going forward. And, if they get through their little furlough hiatus that they're sitting in at the moment, hopefully that's something that we can get sorted out soon, because obviously having the US government as our off-taker would be a cracking result. But there is a lot of interest through Department of Defense, now known as Department of War, because we have a very high quality product through AET, our technical partner in Chicago. They're doing a lot of work in with the Department of War, and specifically in a lot of key applications, which brings a lot of credibility to us. It certainly pays much better because they pay very good prices for the purified products that go in there. And I'm even happy to say that we're having some of our product tested with NASA at the moment, which is outstanding.
Wow.
I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. So, hopefully we'll have something to announce on that as well. So it's an evolving story, I guess, the US interest. You're probably leaning towards, are they going to come in and buy us or get involved? I think that can happen, but it's not going to happen until the DFS is completed for obvious reasons. And then we've got to go out and market the heck out of this company all over the world, showcase how particularly unique and valuable it is. In all the key points that I raised in the beginning of this when Sasha asked me that question. And I think they will come. I absolutely think they will come. So the US is not just the only one. I mean, I think they could come from anywhere. I think there's a lot of interest from Europe, and there's certainly interest from Asia. So, yeah, we've just got to button down the hatches and have a look. And marketing the company and marketing what we've got is obviously the way to get on the radars. And we'll be doing a lot of that next year. Well, as soon as the DFS is completed, I'm on my bike.
That NASA testing you just mentioned there, wow. Are they testing concentrate to put into something, or are they testing the SPG test product that you produce?
No, we would provide concentrate. We do provide concentrate to our technical partner AET, American Energy Technologies, and then they are one of the specialists in the world at taking that up to the purified products. It has to be a very, very pure 99.99 to get up to those sort of levels. And then, they're using it within a propellant. So, we'll look, as soon as I can, I will put something out there and show what we're doing. But it's exciting. I mean, it signals. I keep talking about the high purity of what we've got, but until you start getting these, I mean, Safe Loop is another great example where we were picked because of the quality of the product, and that's going fantastically well. Every single update that we've got, it's a little technical, so it's quite hard to put out announcements. I have to break them down a lot in terms of trying to get something out there that people can read and understand. But the end product is that they're going to have a huge demand for these Gen 3 lithium-ion batteries, and it's going to plan. So
It's quite phenomenal. Yeah, it's quite
yeah,
phenomenal. You've got. I mean,
and
you've got.
we've got the quality, so you've got to use it. I
Yeah.
mean, you've got to use what you've got.
You've got the I think if I'm right, you've got the UK graphene company as well that are interested in
Yep.
the product. And if you've got that, you've then potentially got a UK funding source via export finance. So it's like you've got you're reaching out to all parts of the globe.
Look, one of the things I've learned over the last 20 something years of doing this game is that you don't put all your eggs in one basket, particularly not for funding solutions and certainly not for off takers. So we're going to build as many off take relationships in as many different locations as we can. And obviously, we'll have a priority list and a batting order for sure. But we need to build as many as we can so that we don't just provide for P1 for that 10,000, but we can quickly elevate that up to the 60,000 for P2 when that comes online. And then, we want to have the most valuable ones because they're going to give us the most return. Yeah, look, it's exciting times, and next year is going to be, very full as we start trying to move this thing from a studies phase to a production phase.
Yeah. Okay, this is great. I've got one more thing to discuss before we open the floor to questions. I've got one person already requested to speak, Big D, which I'll let him on in a minute. And then anyone else who would like to ask Mike a question, feel free to just use the request to speak function, and I'll line you up in the queue of questions. So just finally from me then, Mike, I know you can't say anything firm in this respect, but has there been any informal interest in perhaps buying the asset, or given that it's emerging as well a tier one globally significant graphite project?
I mean, in short, Darren, yes is the answer to that. But we are kind of backing away interest at this stage for the obvious reason that, with the DFS out there, I think we're going to have a much more valuable company, a much more valuable project. And, why would we be entertaining ideas of giving up anything right now when we don't need to? You know, Typically, as companies move through DFS and they've de-risked and they start getting much more de-risking happening beyond that, you're talking about 15, even up to 20% in terms of market cap against that NPV number. So whatever we end up with an NPV, you go and look at 20% of that, and that's where we might see ourselves sitting as a market cap. And, with a decent
Hundreds of millions, then basically.
well, I haven't got the number yet, so we're all speculating, to be honest,
No,
me
I'm
too.
speculating.
But it's not just about picking a number and saying that's what we're worth, because every moment on that journey that we do something that de-risks it, the DFS is one big de-risk, but then you get funding solutions in place for P1, and then you get P1 underway, and so on and so on. And as you de-risk, the value goes up. I mean, it's pretty simple maths at the end of the day, but what we've got to do is just keep doing all of that, keep adding the value, and then marketing this thing all over the place because we've got something unique. I don't think there are going to be many new graphite companies at all coming into production over the near term. And so if we've got one of the best ones and one of the only ones going into production, surely that puts us in a very, very good space at a time where we all know that not just the US, but Europe, UK, and many others are looking at critical mineral supply chains. And yeah, of course, it's going to put us on a few radars for sure. And we'll just keep talking. And somewhere along the line, these things emerge. We'll have a look.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's fantastic. I think we've spent enough time chatting. We can open the floor now. Like I said, if anyone wants to ask a question, then just use the request to speak function, and we can get you on. Big D was there, and he seems to have disappeared. So I don't know. Oh, he said I've just seen him on Telegram. He's saying he keeps losing his connection. So let's just see what happens now. We'll try it again. I've just enabled you, Big D. Yes, looks like you're
Hello?
online.
Can you
Yep,
hear me?
yep.
Evening, everyone.
Or lunchtime.
Or lunchtime, wherever you are in the world.
Yep.
Mike, can you put into perspective how pure Orem Cross is? How many mines could deliver this high purity in the world?
Look, I honestly can't say for certain the answer to that question because there's a lot of graphite projects out there, and I would have to have a lot of very detailed information in front of me to be able to say that. But there's very few graphite projects can go from up to a 99.99. That's some of the highest purity that you can get. And we've proven that several times now with work that's been done both in Chicago and in China. So I can't say how many others, but I can say that we are right up there. And, it's rare. So, it's got value for sure. Does that answer your question, or have I been a little bit...
Yeah, no, that was brilliant. Yeah. The group keep asking about pencils. Is there any offtakes in the works for making pencils?
Look, the answer is that we don't necessarily sell to the end users. So if there's somebody out there making pencils, they would probably be buying product from somebody that we sell product into. We're taking product as concentrate and selling it into processing companies that will then do whatever they do with it. They might blend it. They may not blend it, use it entirely on its own. They could do anything with it. And realistically, we don't know what they're doing with it because it's not our product anymore once it's gone. And so, yeah, look, they could be putting it ultimately into pencils for sure. They will have some high quality graphite in pencils. It's a blend. It's like coal, where you blend coal, good and bad coal together. It's no different with graphite, but I don't know the answer to that because I don't know. Look, in the off-takers that we've got, I don't know whether there's anybody that is selling into those markets, but I don't know whether, I don't know all of their off-takers, so I couldn't say for certain.
I guess that was maybe a tongue-in-cheek question there, but
I thought maybe we'd get the tennis rackets next.
Yeah. Well, my golf clubs, my graphite shafts—they're the most important thing if we're going to talk about.
It's a running joke on the Blencowe group about how many
Mike answered it
pencils
very
we could make.
sensibly, which was impressive. Okay. Anything more from you, Big D? I've got other people that would like to speak.
Nothing more from me. I'm very excited in this company. Very excited.
Yeah. Okay. Nice one.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Metalhead. Do you want to? Yep. Far away.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Hi, Mike. Good to speak to you. I've just got a question about the downstream processing aspect, because I think it'd probably be fair to say that we heard quite a lot from the company about this sort of around about a year ago, that kind of time, but we haven't heard quite as much since. I just wondered if you'd be able to give us an update on that aspect.
That's a really good point. And the reason for that is that the partner that we've got is one of the most experienced SPG producers in the world, and we're a little minnow. And a year ago, we were even more of a little minnow. And so they don't necessarily want to, go overboard in showcasing themselves as being part of this until we've proven ourselves, which is fair enough. And what does that proof mean? It means, as I've talked about several times on this call, de-risking, getting past these milestones. So as we go from DFS through to first production and we start achieving some of the lines in the sand, I think we'll see that start to ramp up quite a lot. But it's still there. It's still happening. It's still very much part of our strategy. And actually, it's evolving all the time in terms of where we want to do it. We've now got a different location, slightly different location, obviously very close, but to where we originally thought we were going to put it. And it's, the way we're going to do it, how we're going to do it is all evolving. We're having to, work this one out as we go along. So luckily it's P3, it's not P1. So, we've got a little bit of time to get it all together. But it's definitely part of our strategy. And I think it's a massive differentiator for us because it's no rocket science. It's absolutely clear that end users want to buy SPG from outside of China if they possibly can to take away that risk. And we will get a lot of people paying us good prices if we can do that. So, it's definitely part of our strategy, and going forward, definitely part of our strategy as we evolve.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks. Just to clarify, that is it still expected to be part of the DFS, which is coming towards the
Yes,
end of November?
it has to be. And, originally I wanted to try and get 3 separate DFSs out because I wanted to try and spread them out over the course of this year. But it quickly became apparent that P1 didn't work on its own because it never was meant to. I mean, you don't just go and put a little stage 1 plant up, which is never going to evolve into something bigger. It won't get you the returns that justify it. So it had to have P2 attached to it. And then once you've got P2 attached to it and you're making all of the small flat rate and you don't want throwing it into like everybody else, rubbish prices, you have to have the downstream processing facility to take a portion of that small flake concentrate, which then puts P3 into the mix. And so P1, P2, P3 all become part of the same DFS. But when we actually go to funding solutions, I've talked about a funding solution for P1 and then a funding solution for P2 and P3. And we will have separate models that we've got to show them because they will want to see them in different contexts. But they all do tie in together for sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for that, Metalhead.
You were
Al,
talking about graphite shafts on golf clubs, and then Metalhead asked the next question. I thought that was quite ironic.
yeah, yeah, it is actually. Yeah, okay. So I've got Al now. Al, do you want to ask a question?
Brilliant, thank you. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yep, we
Yes.
can.
Brilliant. Mike, just a huge thank you for these. It really does make a massive difference for investors hearing it from you, and everything's really clear and well presented, so much appreciated. A quick thing on off-takes, if that's possible. 2 parts was, one, with the moves we have, is anything progressing further with those whilst we wait? And are there any potential further ones lined up? Thanks, Mike.
Sorry, I'm not hearing it quite as well as I thought I did. Is the question, is there anything continuing to evolve with the existing offtake agreements? And then second part is, are there new ones coming up? Is that what you said?
Correct. Thank you.
Yeah, so in terms of the existing ones, we have existing agreements. They're non-binding because neither them nor us want to lock in binding agreements until we've completed a DFS, until we know we've got funding to obviously build something. It would be remiss of us to lock ourselves into something that we couldn't fulfill. But they want the product as much as we want to sell it to them. So all of those non-binding contracts can evolve into binding contracts pretty quickly once we've got ourselves into that position where we can do that. So they will evolve. It's just a question of first DFS and beyond that funding. And then in terms of new ones, absolutely. We have samples out there with many, many different customers or potential customers right now, and will always continue to do so. And they become new contracts. They will. And as I said earlier in this call, we've broken through our barrier of 10,000 a while ago, which is great because we know we can sell everything we can produce for P1. But for us, it's about hitting that 60,000 target, and then obviously getting the SPG stuff. And we want to make sure that we can get the best off takers because they pay the best. So we're going to always be talking to different people. The graphene, as Darren mentioned earlier, is very, very exciting. Selling that into UK markets, and there's just a whole host of different opportunities out there. But a lot of them are very discerning, and they don't want to take up contracts until they can see that we've got past the DFS and we're getting ourselves for production. They've seen a heck of a lot of graphite companies talk big and not deliver, and I can see where they're coming from. Do they want to lock themselves into contracts with people that ultimately don't ever go and build a mine and produce? So they're watching us. And I think that as we clear the next hurdles and we start getting towards first production, we'll have, I was going to say an avalanche. I don't think it'll ever be as much as that, but there will be an enormous amount of new people that come on. You can imagine if we're one of the only new graphite producers and we've got high quality. I mean, it's like being the best looking girl at the dance. We want to use that as much as we can, but we've also got to just manage it. We're a small team. We can only be in a few places at once, and we've just got to make sure that we don't trip over our own 2 feet. So, we're well aware of the risks. We're trying to manage all of those as we go along. But there are great opportunities out there. And I think with what's happening in the States in particular, actually, that's not true with the whole critical mineral supply chain. There's great opportunities for us going forward, and we've just got to be in the position where we can take them.
Yeah, okay. Does that answer your question there? Has he gone? Maybe he's dropped off. I don't know. Can you hear me, mate?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Well, we've got someone else, Elijah, who would like to ask a question. Elijah, if you want to unmute yourself, go ahead. If I've got the name right. That's it.
It's Ilya. How you going? How you going, Mike? Ilya, how you going?
Hi, Ilya. How you doing?
I'm good, mate. Look, as far as I'm concerned, resource and grade is king, okay? So the deeper holes that we drill down 100 metres, they being assayed for grade? Yeah.
Everything that we've drilled will be assayed, and definitely for grade, for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't think grade is as much king in graphite as it is with other things. And the reason for that is that grade becomes the master of everything if you're doing, let's say, gold, because it ultimately determines how much you can produce. Because if you've got a gold mine, you're limited by how much you can produce. So the higher the grade, the more you can produce of the same tons. With us, our limitation is not production. We can produce, if I had sales for 50,000 tons tomorrow, I could go and produce that. If I had sales for 100,000 tons tomorrow, I could go and produce that, and so on and so on. So it obviously means we've got to, if you have a lower grade, you just have to build a bigger plant. But, when you start expanding and getting much bigger, it becomes the economies of scale kick in anyway. So because we're limited, our limitation in graphite is all about how much you can sell into the market, not how much you can produce. Grade is not quite as important. I'm not going to say it's not important, because it always is. And, for sure, we will be mining and processing the higher grade first, because we get maximum bang for buck. But yeah, it's not as important as with gold or base metals or something else. But in answer to your question, we'll definitely be assaying both at Beehive, Deep Holes, the Northern Syncline extension. They're all coming in, and Camp Load, which is next off the rank.
Yeah, fair enough. Because what I think the market's missing here is they still haven't recognised that this is fast becoming a Tier 1 project. I mean, you're drilling down to 100 metres, you're showing graphite. I mean, yeah, I love it. It's good.
Yeah, well, it's true. I mean, we'd only ever drilled down to 30, just beyond 30 meters, and we were
That's
in
right.
graphite.
Yep.
And then we thought, okay, well, let's go and drill a couple of holes down to 100 at Beehive, and that was still in graphite. And then we did the same back at Northern Syncline down to 100, and that was still in graphite. So who knows how deep it goes? But obviously, as you go deeper in terms of mining it, it becomes more expensive. So, somewhere along the line, if you ever got to that point where that 100-meter plus graphite was in your production story, it would be underground mining, and you just have to, or maybe a big open pit, I don't know. But, it becomes more expensive. So you want to take the low-hanging fruit. You want to mine as much as you can from surface to keep your operating costs down. Remember the first thing I said at the front end of this, low operating costs. And part of that low operating cost comes from the fact that we don't have any drill and blast. We just have to literally scrape it off from the surface down to very shallow depths. And that keeps it very, very cost effective for us. And whilst there's enormous quantities down below, I don't know at what point we would be mining that. Probably I'd be dead by then. But it will be mined one day.
As long as it's there, that's the main thing.
It is definitely there. We've proven it, and that's why we did it. Not so much to put it into our DFS or anything like that. In fact, those deep holes won't go into the DFS. It's just a question of proving that it's there.
And I think that's what the market's missing.
Well, we've showed it.
Anyway.
I mean, we pointed it out when we announced the deeper holes. And once we get those assay results, we'll announce it and point it out again. You've got to keep, and that's what going out to these conferences and road showing is, just trying to find wider audiences and getting that message out there.
Exactly. Good luck.
Thank
All
you.
the best.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Ilya. Sorry for getting your name wrong.
You're right. You're welcome. It's all good.
I just saw. If anyone wants to ask a question, feel free to use the request to speak function. Otherwise, we're going to close the questions off in a second. I just did see one come up on Telegram. I'm probably sure you can't answer this, Mike, but it says, "Can someone ask if the DFS will be a billion MPV?" Obviously, with the SPG graphite, SPG factored in.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers, so I mean, honestly, and I wouldn't, if I did have the numbers, I wouldn't tell you until it's published and put out there
No.
anyway. But you know, sometimes you get a bit hooked up on a number. You know, it's very important that we realize that it's going to be a big number and it's a low capex, and it's as much about the ratio of your NPV against your capex that you're putting in as anything. Because at the end of the day, if you've got a billion NPV but you're putting $1 billion into it, it obviously is not the same as having a billion NPV and you're putting $100 million into it. So there are a number of factors that go into that. And it's also, from where I'm sitting, so important that we can back it up. Because I've seen a number of DFSs out for graphite where they've just taken some of the spurious pricing that's thrown out on some of these reports. And, you know, it's just not correct. And some of these weighted average prices I see in some of these DFSs just make me want to laugh or cry or both. And, you know, we've made a point of ensuring that everything that we put in here has to stand up. Because if it doesn't, it's not bankable. And ultimately, if it doesn't get bankable, you don't get funding and you don't have a project. It doesn't go into production. And we just join the long queue of graphite projects that never go anywhere. So it has to be done in a way that we can stand behind it. And that's a difficult ask because you don't have a market that says, right, you can go and look at the London metal market and see what, you know, zinc or lead or nickel or copper is trading at, and that's your price, or gold. We don't have that. And so, you know, it's much more difficult to be able to prove that to the bankable, to the funding partners, than if it were something else, where you can obviously get more certainty about price. But, you know, for us, it's about giving it as much credibility as possible. Because that's the only way we're going to get funding partners over the line to give us the money to take into production. And yeah, for me, I don't know what that number is. To throw it back at the person who asked with a bit of tongue in cheek, I ask my COO that same question every second day, and he's not telling me. So, you know, what he says to me is wait until it's finished, and I probably have to say the same thing.
I think the angle of that question is factoring in the SPG plant, which is, you know, much bigger margins. Are we going to see a more material, if you like, MPV figure over and above the graphite?
No, we will. And that's, you know, when we talked about getting a DFS that was, you know, significantly better than the PFS, which in itself was darn good. The big catalyst for that change, you know, there's only so much lower that we can reduce operating costs. I mean, we can't, you know, magic this out of the ground. The big catalyst to drive up the NPV on the DFS is all around the SPG and the downstream processing. And one of the things that's happened in the last couple of months, which again is why I say I don't mind the delays that we've had, because things are happening all the time, is that we've found ways to sell the waste product out of that SPG plant for a much higher price than we had originally anticipated. And that makes a huge difference, because if you're creating, you know, 20-30% of, that's just about 30% of waste from that, you know, if you're selling it for very little or you're selling it for a lot, it makes a big difference. So yeah, the SPG plant will make a big difference to that ultimate NPV and the whole study.
Yeah, fantastic. I don't know if we've got one more question from Metalhead or whether that was he just reconnected. Did you want to ask another question?
Yeah, if that's okay. Yeah. Sorry, I dropped out for a minute, so can I apologise in advance if this has already been answered? It's actually MPV related again, but a bit less specific. So obviously a few years ago, the company put out the PFS with an MPV of, I think it's about $480 million, something like that. And I think, according to my understanding anyway, since then, there's been a slight kind of general downward trend in the graphite price. I mean, I know there's probably no such thing as a single graphite price, but my impression certainly is that graphite prices have gone down since the PFS. But obviously,
No, that's not true, Medley. They've actually gone up.
have they?
They
Okay.
are increasing. Yeah,
Oh,
and
right. Okay.
particularly as the concentrates, they're definitely increasing, and specifically if you're getting into Western markets, they've increased quite a lot.
Well, wasn't the sorry to
Interesting.
interject there? Wasn't the safe loop pricing a massive premium to normal graphite pricing?
Yeah, well, I don't say a massive premium, but it's at a premium. But we're not,
premium.
Safe Loop doesn't come into our DFS at all because we haven't got any contracts with them. It's a project. It's a development project at this stage. Now, it comes in somewhere in the DFS as blue sky because it can create this enormous off-taker for us at premium prices that we have exclusivity into. So it's kind of one of those things you put into your DFS as blue sky, but you can't bring those numbers in for the very reason I've just mentioned to the last question, is that we have to have off-takers that we can honestly say that we've got contracts, and right now Safe Loop is not ready to be giving anyone contracts for anything because they're still developing the battery, the Generation 3 battery that's going to go into those standardized EV buses.
Yeah, absolutely. But given that the timeline of many years of production from Orme Cross, you would think that would come into scope at some point. But yeah,
Oh,
okay,
don't get me wrong. It's only got another year and a half, and then they should start rolling it out. And I would imagine it's going to grow pretty quickly after that. And we probably won't have P2 production up and running by then, or it's certainly going to be pretty close. But, Safe Loop is not going to suddenly turn on the tap for 100,000 tons of small flake concentrate on day one. It won't happen. I mean, it's going to grow like everyone. But it's a great opportunity for sure. But yeah, in terms of the pricing, look, the Metley, I interrupted you. You had a bit more to say on your question, but I just interrupted because it was wrong. The prices have gone up.
Yes, I think probably in that case, what I was going to say was slightly misconceived. But what I was going to say was obviously during the same period since the PFS, you've been doing all these things to try and add value. So, for example, the downstream processing, looking for premium off-takers, increasing the resource, all those kinds of things. And so what I was going to say was, how did the sort of the two things, the changes in the graphite price versus the value add stuff you've been doing, kind of net off against each other? Are you left in a position where you're sort of scrambling to maintain that 480 million MPV, or
Not
are you
at
really
all. I mean, we want to absolutely knock 480 million out of the park, and I've said that before, and I'll say it again. The biggest single negative that we're probably going to have to work against is that, the world was a different place 2 years ago, and interest rates were a lot lower, and we used a discount rate of 8 for the PFS, and we'll probably be using a higher discount rate for the DFS, and that makes a massive difference. I don't think people necessarily appreciate that, but the cost of money is higher, and we've got to be realistic. However, where we're very lucky in our favor is that if we assume that we're going to get DFC money as funds to build this, they typically charge a much lower rate, around half what commercial banks are charging. So obviously, if we're anticipating a significant amount of our debt coming from either the DFC or a similar partner like the DFC, it does allow us to have a lower discount rate used in there. But that's the one thing that's probably working against us. Most of the other things are working for us. On the operating cost side, I'm trying to think what's gone up. I mean, there's a bit of inflation, of course, definitely in terms of the plant, but I don't really know the answer to your question because I haven't got the final numbers in front of me. But it's a combination of a lot of things that will get this NPV higher. It's not any one thing. It's going to be all of them working together.
Thank you. It's interesting what you say about the DFC charging a lower interest rate. I wonder whether, say for the sake of an example, that you're told you've got to do your MPV number in the DFS at a sort of as an MPV 9 or something. I wonder whether it'd be worth
including, just for illustrative purposes, an MPV6 or something, so that people can
No, well,
see
we'll never put
what
six
kind
because
of
that's
thing you
just
might?
not realistic at all. But what we'll do when we announce it, we'll pick whether we're going to do 10 or whatever the number is. But in the
Yeah,
actual DFS document that we will hand out to banks or any other parties that we hand it out to, we will have a table that has ranges, and it'll have all of them. It'll have everything from 6 to 16 because they want to pick
yeah,
whichever one they want to use, and they probably will pick a high one because at the end of the day, they're more conservative. But we've got to pick a number to announce, and we will pick it on the basis of why, and we'll tell everyone why we've picked it and for what reasons. But I'm just saying that luckily for us, I don't necessarily contemplate going out to the commercial banks in the same way. I'm hoping that we can, get ourselves a debt provider that is in it for slightly different reasons, and for that they charge a lower interest rate. Now, I don't have them yet. I'm just saying that's what we're looking to do, and obviously we have a relationship with the DFC, so it's something that we would see going forward. But yeah, it's the one thing that has changed because if you recall, a couple of years ago, the world was sitting at, I think, most countries were sitting on zero. I think you could put money in the bank and you got nothing for it. Now it's different. Inflation obviously took its toll, and everyone had to start putting interest rates up to curb that. But let's not go on too long, otherwise we're going to bore the tears out of everyone. Just wait and see, and we'll obviously announce it and explain what we're using and why.
really helpful. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, well, I think that actually brings us to the end, Mike. Absolutely fantastic update from you. Some great questions from the audience. Probably one of the most well attended spaces we've done to date, and not surprising, really, given where the company are at and the exciting next few months ahead. So, obviously, there's plenty happening. So, hopefully, we can reschedule another one of these in the near future. Thanks for the update, Mike.
No, I appreciate that. And again, thanks to everyone for coming along and listening and all the good questions. And yeah, just keep watching the space. There's a lot that's going to happen over the next weeks rather than months. And yeah, hopefully we can show everyone how damn good this project is.